Long before water bombers and high-tech aerial cameras made fighting wildfires look so cool, there was this bold little experiment. Imagine an old-school plane, a raging fire, and a crew of pilots armed with nothing but water sacks and a whole lot of bravery. This is the story of how humans first tried to battle fire from up in the air. Quite the adventure back then. Let's take a trip back to 1921, a time when the forests of northern Ontario, Canada were ablaze in an unprecedented wildfire season. Timber was the gold rush of the time, fueling the economy and rebuilding cities. But dry weather and intense lightning storms turned those vast forests into tinderboxes. One fire in particular, near the town of 𝗔𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓, would go down in history as one of the worst in Canadian memory. I can only imagine how overwhelmed the ground crews must have felt, armed with shovels, axes, and horse-drawn water carts. Nature was winning, and it seemed like there was no way to stop it. But what about the idea of using airplanes to fight fires? It was still a relatively new invention, and many people thought it was too risky and experimental. But during World War I, Canada had trained thousands of pilots, and many had returned home looking for a new purpose. So, in the early 1920s, a group of visionary Canadian foresters and ex-military pilots came up with a bold idea. They would load sacks of water onto a 𝗔𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 and fly it over an active wildfire. Can you imagine the thrill and terror of flying low over a burning forest, dropping water-filled canvas bags by hand? Each pass carried the risk of engine stall, downdraft, or being engulfed in flame or smoke. But it worked, sort of. The impact was modest in terms of actual fire suppression, but symbolically, it proved that aircraft could play a role in forest firefighting, and that's exactly what happened. By the mid-1920s, Canada and the United States began experimenting more seriously with aviation and wildfire management, not just for water drops, but for aerial reconnaissance and helping to locate and track fires faster. As wildfires grow fiercer and more frequent, we owe a strange debt to those early aviators of the 1920s who looked at a wall of flame and said, "Let's fly into it." It was dangerous, it was improvised, and by modern standards, it was almost laughably ineffective. But it was bold, it was imaginative, and it was the beginning of something extraordinary. So, what do you think? Can you imagine being one of those early pilots flying into a wall of flame and dropping water by hand? Do you think we've come a long way since then, or are we still facing the same challenges when it comes to fighting wildfires? Let's talk more about how it all started with the Great Fire of 1921. It all started with a few smaller fires, some sparked by lightning, others from sparks caused by passing trains or folks not being careful. Before long, these fires all merged into one huge, out-of-control blaze. It raced across northeastern Ontario, burning through over 1,700 square kilometers of forests and farmland. This massive firestorm hit towns like 𝗔𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓, Charlton, 𝗔𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓, and some smaller communities nearby. The flames moved insanely fast. With strong winds blowing and the land itself dry as a bone, the fire turned into a crown fire, a type where the flames jump from treetop to treetop faster than anyone can run. People who saw it say they heard a loud roaring sound, like a freight train rushing by, and the sky turned completely black right in the middle of the day. When the fire finally cooled down, it was one of the deadliest in Canadian history. 𝗔𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓, a lively town on Lake Timiskaming's shores, was almost wiped out. In less than 3 hours, most of it was just ash and ruins. Folks tell stories of families running to the lake, clutching babies and a few valuables, as walls of flames swallowed their homes. Trains at nearby stations were packed with scared people escaping. Those who didn't get out in time had to find water or dig shallow holes in the ground to hide. The human toll was heartbreaking. At least 43 people lost their lives, though some say it was even higher. Thousands lost their homes, and the damage to the economy was huge. Entire townships disappeared completely. Livestock, equipment, businesses all reduced to ash. The government stepped in and declared a state of emergency quickly. Relief efforts got rolling fast, and newspapers across Canada published powerful photos and stories from survivors. Donations started pouring in from all over. But beyond all the destruction, people started to realize that Canada's way of dealing with wildfires needed to change. The 1921 fires showed just how vulnerable remote communities were when disaster struck. So, Ontario began to work on better fire prevention plans. Things like more organized fire ranger teams, earlier warning systems, and, most notably, the first ever use of airplanes to spot and fight fires. It was during those smoky skies in Ontario that the idea of aerial firefighting came about, laying the groundwork for using aircraft to track and put out forest fires across North America.